In the Stone Age, while others suffered, I led my people to eat well with soup and roasted meat served in bowls, with rice and advanced weapons, thanks to my skills as an elite soldier. Before this, I was the king of special forces. While chasing a criminal, I fell off a cliff. When I woke up, I saw women in furs and felt a sharp pain in my leg. From experience, I knew it was a snake bite, so I took a stone knife and cut the wound open. I cauterized the wound. I screamed and collapsed, hoping the heat would kill the venom. After a night near death, I survived. Tough as a cockroach, I ate the meat a woman gave me and asked for more, but she refused. It made sense. After all, in this small tribe of barely 50 people, daily food was extremely limited. Besides, it was winter and food was saved for the strong. I had to find my own food as the weather worsened. I had to find a way to store food. The easiest meat was the fish in the nearby river, less than a kilometer away, but the tribe didn't eat fish or have tools. So I looked for vines to weave a fishing basket and soon brought back a large bundle. I brought the vines to the cave and started weaving, surrounded by curious children who had no idea what it was. They didn't speak. Nearby, some women were busy drying grass. Suddenly, a scream of terror rang out. I saw the chief and 2 others running with giant bird eggs. They were screaming. I heard shrieks as a 10-foot-tall terror bird chased the chief. I yelled, "Drop the eggs!" But no one understood me. The chief didn't drop the egg and the bird didn't let up. Soon, it reached him and delivered a fatal peck. It killed him. Seeing this, the other 2 dropped the eggs and ran for the trees to save themselves. The children beside me screamed in terror. Having lost its target, the terror bird changed course and headed for them. I quickly shoved the children into the cave, and the women blocked it with a rock, since the bird couldn't get in. It turned and began devouring the chief. I grit my teeth, determined to kill it. It had tasted human flesh and knew where we were. My tribe would have no peace. I had no weapons and fighting was suicide. But then, I saw the bird's long legs. I had an idea and got ready. I found 2 stones and tied one to each end of the snake's skin from my waist. With my bolus ready, I slipped through the opening. Inside, everyone was stunned. They wanted to stop me but feared attracting the bird, so they just watched. I hid in the bushes, creeping closer. I was meters from the bird. It kept eating, unaware of me. I stood up silently, gripping the snakeskin cord. I started spinning the bolus over my head until the cord pulled tight. The bird noticed the movement, shrieked, and charged at me. In the cave, women and children screamed in panic, but I stood my ground. I stayed motionless. At 30 meters, I threw the bolus. The cord shot out, spinning through the air. The bird didn't just sit, it collapsed. It flapped its wings wildly, but couldn't get back up. In the cave, everyone stared in shock. I called 2 boys over to hold the bird's neck while I prepared. I raised a rock and brought it down. The bird's head shattered, and its body stopped twitching. The boys looked at me with fear and respect. I untangled the skin from its legs, tied it back on, and signaled that I was taking the bird's head. When I called them to the cave, they obeyed me without hesitation. Like loyal followers, the 3 of us dragged the bird to the cave. Seeing the massive prey, the people waiting inside emerged. They shouted and rushed out to help. The 2 men from the trees climbed down, seeing how I killed the terror bird alone. They felt great admiration. It was the first time the tribe caught such large prey. In the cave, I claimed the feathers and let them prepare the rest. Now, out of danger, I continued. I spent an hour and a half weaving until the baskets were ready. I used one for entrails and headed to the river. A woman, seeing me go to the river alone, followed me. She felt she had to protect me because of my skills and my new followers. Seeing me with another contraption, they all ran after me. The 4 of us reached the river. I watched the water, and what I saw amazed and terrified me. In minutes, I witnessed several scenes. Big fish were eating the small ones. There were carnivorous fish everywhere. The ecosystem was incredible. The water was clear and moving. The fish were abundant. I chose a spot and submerged the basket. The scent of meat spread and nearby fish swarmed, fighting for the entrails. I pulled the basket up, trapping 4 large fish inside. The fish didn't flee. They swirled around the remains. It looked like I was feeding koi fish. The 2 boys and the woman were amazed by this strange object catching legless creatures. They didn't understand its purpose. I tossed the 4 fish onto the ground. I prepared them, cutting and eating the raw fish. Seeing me, they understood it was food and began to imitate me. They copied my movements and tasted a piece. The woman's eyes lit up immediately. She saw a new food source and asked me to teach her to fish, but I didn't put her to work. Instead, I asked her and a boy to clean the fish. I had the woman and 1 boy cleaning the catch while the other boy worked alongside them. The other boy skewered them on vines for transport. I kept fishing while the fish were still gathered there. I used the basket like a net. Every time I pulled it out, I had a massive harvest. We worked all afternoon and caught over 200 fish, the largest weighing 10 kilos. We couldn't carry it all, so I sent a boy back to call for help. After asking for help, the group finally marched triumphantly back to the cave with our loot. The gathering and hunting parties had already returned. Without tools, they only caught small animals like rabbits and pheasants. Just then, the children arrived. They reached the cave with the fish, showing off their catch. The elders, still mourning the chief, looked up and saw the haul. Their spirits lifted and the tragedy of the chief was forgotten. After preparing the catch, the tribe gathered in the clearing. They piled up firewood and placed the chief's body on top. An elder wearing goat horns lit the pyre. The flames grew, engulfing the chief and illuminating everyone's faces. The children smelled the burning flesh and swallowed hard. There was no sadness. The adults were calm with the new food. I stood back to observe. I observed the tribe. 52 people in total, 8 men, 15 women, and the rest children. The man who had just lit the fire was the elder. He was the wisest, but now he was perhaps second in command, because I was replacing him. In his place stood a man with 6 fingers. His weapon was a club, and he looked dim-witted, perhaps from inbreeding. Next to him was a guy with a feather necklace. He looked fierce, and also used a club. Behind him was Silas, wearing a bone necklace and holding a rock as a weapon. Further off was a 15-year-old boy with one ear and many scars. His weapon was a femur spear. Beside him was Arthur, 17, and the former chief's son, armed with 2 saber-toothed tiger fangs. He was the tallest. With a robust body, his weapon was a femur. The last was a lame man with a cane who went with the gathering group. He loved carving stone and dreamed of making a tray. Overall, Arthur and Derek were considered the combat elite. When the cremation ended, it was night. They entered the cave to distribute food, though they didn't usually eat fish. Today they let me distribute it. I showed them how to eat fish, and everyone imitated me, eating with gusto. They ate their fill. They got excited, dancing and eating. I felt at home and swore to lead the tribe to a better life. When we finished, the elder drew my river fishing on the wall while I was busy elsewhere. I was teaching the women to weave back baskets with straps so they wouldn't use skins for carrying, improving efficiency. They loved them and took turns trying them on, agreeing to look for more vines tomorrow. To make their own, they gave me 2 deer skins in gratitude. I was the first child in the tribe to wear fur clothes. I wasn't selfish. I kept one and gave the other to the mothers of small children for clothes, since children's resistance is low and there was no medicine. A cold could be fatal, so that deer skin was worth a life. I knew what I was doing. I needed their help, and they wouldn't be ungrateful. The next day, I woke up early after my military routine, feeling thirsty. The water from the pool was still hard for me to drink. It was time to fire some containers. People left the cave, but today they weren't in a hurry. The elder gathered the men because he wanted to choose a new leader to give orders. I decided to join. Among the candidates, the competition was simple. 2 would fight unarmed, and the best would be leader. Soon, Duncan and Derek won. I watched their fights, shaking my head. They had no technique, only brute force. The duel between Duncan and Derek arrived. Derek, at 6'3", looked like a tower, and Duncan didn't know how to start. He wasn't afraid. He screamed and attacked first, but Derek grabbed him with his massive hands before he could react. Derek threw him several meters. He hit the ground and stayed down. Excited, Derek beat his chest while the people screamed in approval. They were accepting the new leader, so I stepped forward. I'm next, I thought. Derek saw my challenge and beat his chest. He roared, but I didn't flinch. I stood before Derek in a combat stance. He looked down at me with disdain. The children cheered for me. I lunged at Derek, stepped on his thigh for momentum, and drove a knee into his chin. Derek collapsed, writhing in pain. The tribe stood there with their mouths open. Derek was the strongest. He shouldn't have been defeated in a second, especially by a child. The elder watched, a powerful feeling rising in his heart. The tribe could become more powerful because of me. Before he could speak, they were already lifting me on their shoulders. They celebrated their new leader. In 2 days, I had brought 2 mini miracles. It was the result I expected. Derek recovered and, still resentful, charged at me. I rolled across the ground and grabbed 2 of his fingers from behind. I twisted them and moved behind him, kicking the back of his knee. He fell face first, and the more he struggled, the more it hurt. The brave Derek cried out and begged for mercy. I let him go and turned to enter the cave. The crowd erupted. The children cheered that a boy had beaten an adult, while the women gathered vines. They wanted me to teach them how to weave baskets. The elder watched the cave with a complex expression until I reappeared. I stood before everyone wearing my deerskin outfit, my hair tied back with snake skin. I looked clean and capable. I chose this style because it's practical. It's a look that signifies a worker ready for action. Under the tribe's gaze, I stepped in and organized the work, adjusting the gathering team's duties. The tribe had 15 adult women, and 6 of them were heavily pregnant. I sent 8 of the others out to gather with baskets. They didn't need much, just a stick each. The 6 pregnant women stayed to mind the home and the toddlers, while the older kids pulled weeds. I had one woman lead 2 boys to the river to fish. Everyone had their tasks assigned. One man, who looked quite depressed, had been tasked with polishing a stone basin. I planned to put him in charge of pottery, but firing ceramics isn't simple, so I gave him a temporary job. Yesterday's fish wouldn't last in this heat without smoking it, so I showed him how and left him to it. Meanwhile, I dug a hole for a 3-level kiln, bottom for ash, middle for wood, and top for the clay. It took hours to build, but it was too damp to use yet, so I called over 2 boys. I had them light fires on each level to dry it out, so it would be ready by the afternoon. With that organized, I went to the river for clay, used a flat pebble as a table, and began kneading it. Soon, a wide-mouthed jar was ready. I made 4 more to dry in the sun, then started on others. I crafted 2-handled pots, dozens of bowls, and small sets of tableware. They were practical, not beautiful, and I wasn't sure how many would actually survive. By mid-afternoon, I put everything into the kiln while the 2 boys and the others watched without blinking. They watched closely as their leader produced vessel after vessel. They didn't know if these would work, but I ignored them and sat by the fire until the gathering group returned. They had a great harvest, baskets of fruit, vines for weaving, 2 turkey-sized birds, eggs, and moles. With over 100 fish caught today, the harvest was impressive. We had more than we could eat. This extra food could be stored for when the women give birth. I waited for the bowls to turn white. I stopped adding wood and let the fire die out. Once it cooled, I would open the kiln while the tired group gathered by the bonfire. With happy smiles, they knew they wouldn't go hungry. I prepared the 2 large birds like beggar's chicken, a delicacy they had never tasted. I had no appetite. The food barely had any salt, which was a precious commodity obtained only through trade. I wondered if I could trade ceramics for more salt. After eating, the women returned to the cave to weave useful baskets. The smaller gathering team harvested even more today. I distributed the furs, so now all the children had blankets. The next morning, I woke up and went to check the firing. A nervous boy pulled the elder over, babbling excitedly. My hopes for salt and soup depended on this. With my heart in my throat, I pried open the kiln lid. I looked inside. The bowls were a brilliant earthy red, smooth as if glazed, and seeing this, the elder, he grabbed a bowl, stroking it with pure excitement. He ran to the cave and returned with a bowl of water, showing the tribe the beautiful vessel. I smiled and kept unloading. The 4 pots and 4 jars came out perfect, smooth, and crack-free. Of the 8 spoons, only 2 survived the heat. Out of 20 bowls, only 12 were usable. As the red pieces emerged, causing a commotion, Sam and David moved fast. They each grabbed a jar and raced to the river, returning quickly with fresh water. The elder stayed calm despite his excitement and asked how I did it. Before I could speak, the boys who helped me explained it to him. I only cared if I could trade them for salt, and told the elder. He looked at me like I was a spendthrift as he pointed to the pieces. He explained in his dialect just how valuable these were. When I finally understood, I was absolutely shocked. 1 bowl was worth a young man or 2 girls. Jars and pots were even more precious since water containers were so rare. Polishing a stone basin took a lifetime. Some tribes traded their own people for containers, thinking more mouths were just a burden. But I believe more people meant more food and strength, bringing new blood to the tribe. With that in mind, I assigned the tasks. The elder and 7 hunters would set out, taking a jar, a pot, and 3 bowls to trade for people and salt. The jar for 2 women, the pot for 2 young men, and the 3 bowls for salt or otherwise for girls. With orders given, they left while I continued organizing the day's work. The trade was with a western tribe. After crossing a mountain and a valley, they arrived at a tribe larger than ours, with about 100 members who had traded goods before. Seeing them arrive, the bald leader of the other tribe came out to meet them. The elder pulled out a bowl and said, "We trade this for salt." The bald leader's eyes sparkled. The bowl was smooth and lighter than their stone basins. He ordered a bag of salt brought out, but the elder saw it and shook his head. "We want more, and also 2 adult women." With that said, the elder pulled out the jar, and the leader was stunned. Such a large basin would hold more water, but he hesitated. It was worth trading 2 women for the basin, but it was autumn, the harvest season. Fewer people meant a smaller harvest. In the end, he accepted, thinking fewer people meant less consumption and a great deal. Soon, 2 women were brought out. They were 2 sisters. The older one carried a frail 4-year-old boy who was motionless and sick. "We took these 2. Trade them for your stone disc. The boy is a gift." The bald leader gestured with disdain, hurrying them along as the elder watched. He said nothing and asked the boy to take out the pot and remaining bowls. "If you want, we will trade these for children." The bald leader already had 1 vessel. Though it was smaller, he was interested but refused. The elder followed my method, gave a demonstration, and cooked a broth. Soon the aroma of meat wafted out. It was wonderful. The other tribe swallowed hard. Meat could be eaten this way? The bald leader, impatient, took the bowl filled with stewed meat. The bald leader tasted the broth and was stunned. What an aroma! The broth was rich with fat, and the meat was juicy. 1 bite revitalized him. For just a few children, he had to trade. The bald leader acted generous and handed them over, even giving orders. They brought a large package of salted food, filling David's basket. The elder nodded with satisfaction. Later, the group returned. 7 had left, and 16 came back with the 9 new members. This harvest was better than a day of hunting. The group hurried, reaching the tribe at dusk, but the newcomers stood paralyzed when they saw the clearing. At the entrance were 4 jars I fired today, for pots, and many bowls. I looked at my pottery smiling. It was the happiest day of my life. While on the other side, hundreds of fish hung. As they dried, the women smiled. It was all meat, and now they could get it themselves. The newcomers watched in awe. A single stone disc was traded for 2 adults. The tribe had meat and many things. It seemed like a good place. The elder brought the people to report to me about their work. 8 naked people. I saw a naked child. They were all thin, but it didn't matter. The tribe had plenty of meat. 1 winter would nourish them. I approached the woman and her son. The boy was motionless with a burning fever. He was burning up. I took the woman and the boy to the cave, found a skin to wrap them in, and sat them by the fire. I paced impatiently. Without medicine, how could I break the fever? Suddenly, I remembered gua sha. I prepared immediately and put a pot on to heat. I used fish broth and looked for a bone to scrape with. The terror bird's beak was large. I just had to break it. The woman didn't know what I was doing. When I touched the boy, I frowned. She feared I would abandon him and cried. In that moment, I took action. I took a piece of the beak and told her, "Give me the boy, I can save him." She didn't understand, but she felt I was treating her well, so I took him. I took the bone and scraped red marks onto the boy. The pain made him sob. Shortly after, I finished. I gave the boy back to her and fed him spoonfuls of fish broth. The little one swallowed as soon as the spoon touched him. I sighed in relief. If he ate, there was hope. I just had to wrap him up so he would sweat. He would be safe. The woman calmed down. Although she didn't know what I was doing, it didn't seem like I was hurting him. As soon as she relaxed, her stomach growled. She stared at the broth, swallowing hard. I served her a bowl of soup with fish, and then I continued. I took the boy and bundled him in a skin. It distressed me that a simple fever could be fatal. Food was settled, but what about clothes? To get more skins, we had to hunt large animals, but with our current tools, it was difficult. Current weapons were useless. For future hunts, I would search for materials for weapons or traps. I swore that before winter arrived, everyone would have clothes. When they finished eating, the boy woke up drenched in sweat. I gave him back to the woman and tied his hair, naming him Kevin. The woman was overjoyed. The new leader had saved her son. I gave him the same hairstyle as the others to show he was accepted. Then, I crafted my gear, choosing a straight stick. I tied the terror bird bone spearhead to the stick, creating a spear. I broke a piece of the beak to make a dagger. The remaining material I gave to Mark so he could make another. We only had those 2 pieces. The next morning, I assigned the new tasks. Mark would fire pottery, so everyone had a bowl. The women split up, some to gather and others to fish. The children would help with the hunt. I led the party with Mia, Ron, and Scott, plus the brothers Big Max and Little Max, acquired yesterday. In total, a team of 11 entered the forest. Once inside, we fanned out. I guided my 4 young followers, who carried baskets and ropes. Most of the trees were chestnuts yielding over 10 kilos. The ground was covered in chestnuts and there were large birds, but along the way, I only observed. I didn't hunt yet. A good hunter must know his territory inside and out. I discovered wild boar tracks. It seemed to be an entire herd. The depth of the footprints terrified me. They looked like they weighed 1,000 kilos. I followed the tracks over a ridge. Suddenly, my eyes lit up. In the valley ahead, a mountain stream crossed through. Aloe grew along its banks. More than a dozen boars were drinking water. It looked like a family. The alpha male weighed about 1,500 kilos, with several females and over 10 piglets. Facing them directly was unthinkable. I had to set a trap. I retreated in silence. Back in the forest, the boys were terrified. They had never seen such large prey. I prepared the trap myself, using grass to make snare traps tied to a tree. If a hoof stepped in, the loop would tighten. The more it struggled, the tighter it would get. For safety, the boys climbed the trees. Now I had to make the herd return by the same path. I stealthily circled around. I covered myself in mud, grabbed 2 branches, and jumped out screaming from the bushes. The herd, never having seen such a creature, fled into the forest immediately. I chased them closely, shouting. Soon I heard squeals. Reaching the traps, I saw the alpha male there. A sow was on the ground, but the rope wouldn't last. I approached with my spear, and at the right moment, I drove it into her snout. The tip pierced her neck and blood gushed out. A moment later, the 1,500-kilo giant collapsed, convulsing. I sighed in relief, but a dilemma arose. How to carry such a large boar with only 5 boys? I looked at the struggling sow. I had an idea. First, I tied the sow to a tree and bound her snout. Then, I tied ropes to her front legs. Finally, I tied the male boar's rope to the female. With everything ready, I pulled the snout rope to guide her. Mia, Ron, and Scott took a rope. Walking by her side, Big Max and Little Max followed behind to keep watch. We crossed the forest until we saw the cave, a boy clearing. The brush saw us and shouted to alert the tribe. Soon they came out to meet us, but no one dared to get close. They had never seen prey like this. I asked Mark to prepare a jar of salt water. When he brought it, I dug a hole and placed it inside, level with the ground. Then we pinned the sow down. I cut her neck, and blood flowed directly into the vessel. I poured in a bowl of salt water and stirred. It would coagulate into blood sausage for the soup. The tan boar skin would make shoes or backpacks. With both skins, we could make many. The fat was thick. Later, we would melt it down. The rest, except for the lungs used for fishing bait, was edible. The bones from the skinning were plentiful. We cleaned the large bones to sharpen them into weapons. The entire afternoon was dedicated to processing the 2 boars. It was exhausting but rewarding. Meat hung in the smokehouse, and there was a jar of blood sausage, cooked, along with 3 jars of lard. The children laughed while eating pork rinds, even Kevin. When Mark brought out the pottery at dusk, the group returned. The fishing party brought back hundreds of fish, and the hunters weren't far behind. Pheasants, snakes, bird eggs, weasels, and chestnuts. Most surprising was the large quantity of blood sausage. Kevin's aunt, leading the gathering team, found a new food, a very sweet plant root. Amber, like sugar, could be refined. I congratulated the young woman. At dinner, everyone ate, but the elder looked grim. He began whipping Kevin's aunt with a vine. I remembered that vine was tribal law for punishing those who committed mistakes. Seeing this, I stopped the elder and asked why. He said the root was bait for the demon tree. Whoever ate it would be devoured. Hearing this, I ordered Kevin's aunt to stop giving the root to Kevin. I ordered everyone to stop eating the root, not because I believed him, but in case it was poisonous or addictive. Because of that, I slept alert that night, feeling changes in my body. The night passed without incident. At dawn, I began organizing the day. Everything stayed the same, except Kevin and his mother would fish while I went gathering with my followers. I wanted to see what this demon tree was. It was deep in the mountain. There are no tall trees there, only very dense brush. There are fruit trees, and as I moved, I discovered red chilies, the ones I craved. But the tribe didn't eat them. The spiciness made them believe they weren't edible. I ordered 4 men to gather only chilies while I followed the gathering team. A basin opened before me. There were animal skeletons everywhere. In the middle stood a strange tree about 60 meters tall. Its roots covered 500 meters, growing denser toward the center. It looked like a trap to lure animals. My instinct told me it was dangerous, but I decided to investigate, confident I could retreat safely. With every step, I probed the ground with my spear and slowly advanced toward the center. When my spear touched a hidden area, my elite soldier instinct warned me of danger, so I pulled back the spear and retreated. In that instant, a whistling sound rang out. More than a dozen sharp thorns slammed into the ground. Right where my spear had touched, each thorn had a white flower at the end. They were natural arrows. I felt glad to be alive. I rejoiced, remembering a story. I used my basket as a shield, tied a rope to it, and threw it under the tree. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Many thorns stuck into it. Repeating the action, I collected 2 bundles. Leaving, I said the roots were edible, but only from the edge. I found 100 small demon trees, 3 centimeters thick. They were perfect for making spears. I called the 4 men. They gathered the chilies and took the small trees home. When we arrived, the children swarmed us. We brought everything inside, so they wouldn't get any ideas. To the tribe, what we brought seemed useless. The chilies weren't edible, and the sticks wouldn't kill with one blow, but that didn't ruin my mood. With the time remaining, I wanted to improve my equipment. The thorns were smooth and resilient, about the diameter of a cigarette. As arrows, they would need a heavy bow, which would affect range but offer great penetration. Because of the hardwood, they had to be charred and sharpened for hunting. I assigned a sharpening task to my men. In the future, they would all be equipped with these spears. I still lacked a bow. I could only make a longbow. It's bulky, but powerful. To build it, I needed fir wood, which was plenty in the boar forest. But what concerned me most was the aloe vera I discovered. The fiber from its leaves was ideal for ropes and weaving clothes. Not like linen, but better than animal skin and very resistant. Its sap could treat wounds as an anti-inflammatory and sedative. Thinking of this, I planned to start cultivating aloe vera on a large scale. This way, the tribe would have clothes and wound mortality would drop. The next day, I went to the boar forest. I found 2 fallen fir trees, dry and perfect for bows. I spent a day preparing 10 axes and 10 knives. After a day of carving, a 5-foot longbow took shape. I straightened and polished it for another day. I made the string from pineapple fibers. The arrows were made with the thorns, and for the fletching, I used peacock feathers. I made over 200 arrows. 2 days later, I gathered the tribe. 30 meters away, I hung otter skins and showed them how to throw the javelin. At 30 meters, I hit the mark every time, then demonstrated its use in close combat. The tribe was thrilled. They didn't know their leader was manufacturing weapons for everyone except the youngest. I gave a spear to each person. The hunting team received 3, 2 for throwing and 1 for combat. The children coming of age had to practice every day. Besides clearing weeds and playing, they had to train. The white spear was striking, and the tribe loved it. It was the only long-range weapon besides stones. Then, I demonstrated the bow. At 100 paces, I fired 5 arrows and all hit the otter skin. Everyone was amazed and wanted to touch the bow, but I only showed it to them. I wouldn't hand it out yet. Manufacturing was difficult. After introducing the spear, I made leather boots. The boar skins, once softened, became very resistant. I made sure everyone had a pair. Except for my boots, the rest used boar skin soles, and the upper part was sewn with small animal skins. I made Kevin's boots myself, knee-high and lined with soft fur, very warm. The boy showed them off. After making them, the tribe's skins ran out. The weather grew colder, and we urgently needed more. With enough ceramics, the lame man would fire bricks to build a larger kiln or walls. The children's weeding task was nearly finished. The land outside the cave was clear, ready for building or farming. I thought of England in the 11th century. There was a tree to plant, but for now, I had no seeds. Wild pineapple grew on the mountain, harvested once a year. I prepared to go further to find large herbivores. Gear, weapons, food, and tools, all ready. After giving instructions, I left with my basket. The elder worried. He'd never seen anyone survive a night outside. Herbivores live in meadows, so I had to leave the forest. By noon, the trees grew shorter. Joy, I was finally leaving the forest. My mouth was dry, so I went to a river to drink. As I leaned down with my bowl, a huge monster leaped from the river. A mouth full of fangs lunged to bite me. I spun around, but the monster still bit my basket. Its jaw became trapped. It couldn't let go, only shake its head. It dragged me into the water, thrashing me around. I pulled the dagger from my boot, cut a basket strap, and managed to turn. With one hand, I clung to the other strap, and with the other, I drove the dagger into its head. It thrashed even more violently, tossing me out of the water, then slamming me down, dragging me through the water. I climbed onto its head. I stabbed its eyes. Blood and brain fluids gushed out, clouding the water. Little by little, the monster's struggle lost strength until it convulsed sharply. Exhausted, I swam to the shore. After a rest, the monster died, floating belly up. My basket was still stuck in its mouth. Using a strong branch through its eyes, I dragged it out of the water. It was a 15-foot fish. After resting, I took my axe and started striking its teeth. The triangular teeth, the size of a child's palm, numbered over 50. I ripped them out to free my basket. My fire starter didn't get wet. The basket was damaged, but usable. As I thought about making a fire, I heard footsteps. Turning around, I saw a pale-skinned woman with a young girl. They stared at me, terrified. They screamed and ran. An object remained on the ground. I approached, and it turned out to be a wooden bucket made from a hollowed trunk. They must have come for water, fleeing, and leaving the bucket behind. Maybe they would bring more people, and they did. The woman returned with members of her tribe. They wore white fur robes, and their skin was very pale. The group was stunned to see the fish. A man who looked like the leader looked at me and pointed at the bucket. I understood. With my spear, I pushed the bucket toward him. The leader took the bucket, muttered something, and pointed at the fish. I didn't understand his words, but from his gestures, I guessed his intention. So I acted. I stepped aside. The group struck the fish with fury. Some women wept. The leader smiled. He beat his chest and extended his hand to me. I was perplexed, but I saw his smile. He didn't want to fight. Hesitating, I bumped my fist against his. He laughed and hugged me, saying more words. Communicating with gestures, even though the language was a barrier, the signs allowed us to connect. During the exchange, I told him I came from the other shore and was looking for a horned animal. He nodded, understanding. He told me his tribe had been devoured by that fish. To thank me, he invited me to his tribe. I saw it was getting late and the distance wasn't far, thinking that maybe I accepted. I signaled for them to carry the fish, that it was edible. The man was surprised. They had never eaten fish, only the other way around. Still, they accepted. Since the fish was large, they butchered it. To carry it, I helped. Its silver skin was very smooth, elastic, and waterproof. I decided to keep it. The rest of the meat was cut into pieces for them to carry. Their tribe lived in a giant tree with a space of 100 square meters. It wasn't huge, but it was enough. There were few of them, 14 adults, and with the children, they reached 32. This tribe lived in the hollow of the tree. I called them the Forest Tribe. Their skin was white because they lived in the darkness of the forest. Their elder told me that to the east, past the forest, there was a mountain. A beast with 2 sharp horns lived there. They ran like the wind and were impossible to catch. According to him, I deduced it was a large antelope. Chasing it would be useless, but I could set a trap. I looked confident, but David and the elder had no hope. Without another word, he showed me his clothes. It was the fur of a large rabbit, over half a meter long. They eat moss and dark forest mushrooms. Rabbits are a treasure. They breed like mice. If I domesticated 2 pairs, I'd have hundreds in a year. David led his people to gather mushrooms as bait. Soon a fat rabbit appeared, and they swarmed it. I pulled out my bow and arrow. David stared, stunned. With a whistle, my arrow pierced a rabbit's neck. I gave him an arrow as a symbol of friendship. By midnight, I had killed over 10 rabbits. We split the loot, skins for me, meat for the tribe. Now I just needed to gather more for my people. I could use the horned beasts to pull carts. The next morning, I said goodbye to David and headed out. I left the forest, and a vast prairie opened up before me. I saw herbivore tracks and readied my bow. I laughed with joy. I saw a herd of blue antelopes the size of donkeys. They would be perfect for labor. Their sharp horns were dangerous. One attack could be fatal. I realized it was their mating season. I would control the male, and the others would follow. I hid behind a bush and prepared my bolus. I saw my chance. I threw the bolus, entangling the male's legs. He hit the ground bellowing. Like a cowboy, I threw my lasso, catching 2 females. The rest of the herd panicked and scattered. I tied their legs. To break their pride, I used my axe to remove their horns and cauterize the wounds. The horns would never grow back. The 7 beasts, once furious, were now docile. I tied them together. As darkness fell, I led them to a stream and ate dried rabbit. To the northeast, I saw something. A multicolored rocky mountain reflected vivid colors in the sunset. It was a mineral vein. I had to go there. I want to investigate, but it's too dark. At dawn, bellows wake me. The scene before me is thrilling. I jump for joy. The 2 females that fled returned with 8 calves and another adult. I hide and repeat my move. After some maneuvering, I have them all under control. The herd grows from 7 to 18. By then, the sky is clear. I mount the leader and head toward the mountain. The place is a treasure. I find a rich copper mine. The other colors are associated minerals. With these, the Bronze Age is near. The orange rock is realgar, used as medicine, great for bites or parasites. The white is kaolin for crucibles, and the red earth is a great ore. These are termite mounds. Their earth is perfect for pottery. Luckily, the mountain is only 3 days away on foot. With antelopes pulling a cart, it would be faster. I just need a bridge. With my plans ready, I enjoy the view. East of the mountain, there is a vast water system. I see an immense swamp. The aquatic vegetation is lush, a paradise for wildlife. There is black grass, alfalfa, and tall elephant grass. Every tree is a feast for herbivores. The tribe is perfect for cultivating these. My rabbits and this herd depend on them. There is also wild chive and water celery. Taking them will provide vitamins. By mid-afternoon, I collect a bag of seeds. I tie it to a female's back and hunt for dinner. Soon, 2 of my arrows bring down a giant prehistoric goose. It falls. I pluck the feathers from my arrows and plan to roast it to restock my meat. But as I crouch by the water to clean the bird, I make a discovery. Rice, rice, more rice. It's everywhere. Back at the village, they keep watch. To increase production, David uses brute force. If he sees a burrow, he digs it out. If they don't come out, he uses fire and smoke. The method is effective, and he captures several litters. But this destructive hunting brings misfortune. In this season, all tribes are stockpiling food. The cannibal tribe is no exception. Their food is humans. They eat the men. They keep the women. The day I go to the swamp, the cannibal tribe is attracted by David's fire. The group consists of 40 adult men. Their weapons are stone axes and spears. They are formidable. The 2 leaders ride young mammoths. Our tribe, even with all its members, cannot match their numbers. Facing such an enemy, David and his people flee. The cannibal tribe pursues them. Luckily, he knows the terrain and uses difficult routes so they can't catch them. But someone falls behind. A young girl, gripped by panic, trips and falls. As she tries to get up, a girl separates from the group and the cannibal tribe closes in. They strike her and pierce her with a spear. A horde of savages surrounds her, laughing and drinking her blood. David grits his teeth but doesn't stop. He knows if they attack, they will only be slaughtered. The girl's death stops the enemy for a moment. David runs back to the tribe to inform the elder. The enemy is strong. To attack, there was only one way, and Elder Su made his decision. David would guide his people east of the jungle to find me. With my weapons, the tribe had to be strong. He would stay behind to hold them off. He could no longer walk. David nodded, holding back his pain, and ordered everyone to pack and go east. His heart was full of doubt. Days passed. Where was I? Was I even alive? He didn't know, but if they didn't leave, they would die. There was no choice. Shortly after, from behind, they found them. The treehouse where they lived was now burning. Elder Su set it on fire, hoping to burn some enemies so that everyone could gain time. After the tragedy, the Sioux tribe went from 32 to 30 members. The group advanced without rest toward the east of the Black Forest. They began the journey. David had no hope of finding me, but seeing fresh branches on the path, he took heart. It took them a day and a half to reach the edge of the Black Forest. When they emerged, it was afternoon, the sky tinged with red. The members of the Sioux tribe were captivated. It was the first time they had seen the outside world. But David frowned. My signals ended here. He didn't know where to look. Confused, he noticed traces of a campfire by the stream. Approaching, he saw animal tracks. Among them, the marks of my boots. David sighed in relief. He knew I was close, so he told his people to rest. While they fled, I was in the swamp, searching. Finding rice among the reeds was not easy. Suddenly, I had an idea. Waterfowl like that plant. I just had to look where they gathered. Thinking this, on one hand, I rowed, and on the other, I struck the water. Suddenly, from a nearby reed bed, a flock took flight. I followed their direction. As I approached, a rice field with heavy stalks appeared. My eyes sparkled with excitement. It was what I was looking for. Wild rice. I rowed harder, but just as my canoe was about to arrive, I heard voices. Turning around, I saw shirtless primitive men on floating logs. They were heading toward me, waving their arms and shouting in concern. They were from the Sioux tribe. In the Killen district, the tribe only had about 50 people. They were gathering chestnuts. They saw a fellow human on something that floated, heading toward the dead land the elders spoke of. Out of kindness, the leader, Sarah, shouted at me. She hoped I wouldn't go further. I didn't understand her language, only her perplexity. Seeing that I didn't react, Sarah swam toward me. While I was bewildered, she arrived and pointed to the reed bed with rice, never stopping her shouting. Her expression was anxious and fearful. I saw she had no bad intentions. From her expression, she was telling me it was dangerous, that I shouldn't go. I made a fierce beast gesture and pointed to the reed bed. Sarah shook her head, pointed at me and that land, and with her hand in the water, made a sinking gesture, indicating that I would sink. I understood and sighed in relief. I thanked her for the gesture, but I was prepared. I wouldn't give up. I took the oar and moved forward. Sarah shouted at me, but she didn't swim toward me anymore. The next second, she stood. Stunned, she saw me tie 2 boards to my feet, and with a wicker shield, I walked over that dead land without sinking. Everyone shouted in amazement. They had never seen anyone walk on the dead land without sinking. Although it looked easy, it wasn't. Under the reeds was thick mud. Each step required great strength to lift my feet. After much effort, I reached the rice field. Each plant was 2 meters tall, with stalks heavy with golden grains. I drained a little water and stayed there. I pulled out my snakeskin bag and harvested. I didn't stop until nothing was left. Then, with 2 bags of rice, I returned happily to the canoe. But I had barely rowed a bit when the people of the Sarah tribe surrounded me. They surrounded me. The crowd saw my raft, loaded with 2 sacks, still floating. Their eyes lit up. That floating thing could carry people and objects. The smartest ones imagined rowing in it to gather chestnuts. I looked at the people, feeling anger, but they didn't seem malicious. I contained my anger. Sarah, noticing my annoyance, signaled me, asking if I could teach them, looking at everyone surrounding me in the water. Besides, they had been kind enough to warn me. So I agreed. I instructed them to gather their logs, align them, and I used reeds to tie them. Well, then, I told Sarah to climb on. The raft held her. Sarah got excited and called her people. To let them try it out, the raft held up perfectly. Liam was happy. He knew the raft was easy to build and the materials were easy to find. He looked at me with gratitude and invited me to his tribe, but I refused. Out there, my herd was waiting for me. Liam gave me a chestnut, promising that if I had trouble, I could bring it to his tribe for help. I smiled and carried the 2 sacks of rice to the meadow. After a day, I had harvested 30 kilograms of rice. I didn't dare eat any. I wanted to take it home to plant. But to farm, I needed tools, and for that, I needed copper and tin to forge them. The afternoon David emerged from the jungle. I was on Babeo Mountain, in the small meadow, eating and weaving mining baskets. David's situation was dire. They had fled without fire, and for the last few days, they only ate dried meat. At night, cold and hungry, they huddled together to stay warm. The next morning, full of energy, I guided the beasts toward the west of Babeo Mountain. Meanwhile, at the foot of the mountain, David was organizing his people. He handed out the berries he had gathered. Just then, the tribe pointed at the mountain and shouted. They saw a young man leading a herd. I heard the shouts and saw the Sioux tribe. I was confused. Why were they here? 10 minutes later, David led a group up the slope. Seeing their condition, I frowned. Why were the children here and so filthy? When David saw me, he was stunned once again. He knew I was looking for animals, but not that I would capture them alive. This wasn't the cannibal tribe. Not even the elephant riders could compare to this. In his heart, I was a god. I saw they only had wild berries. It was obvious they didn't even have meat to eat. I brought out the goose and the crane for them. David ate and told me the story, and the others added their own details. When I understood, a chill ran down my spine. There was a cannibal tribe nearby. A terrifying thought crossed my mind. If they reached the Sioux tribe, how far would they be from mine? Thinking of this, I decided I would extract the ore today and return tomorrow. I looked at David and asked what they planned to do. Hearing me, everyone lowered their heads. Winter was coming, but their village was destroyed, burned down, and a cannibal tribe was hunting them. They had nowhere to go. Seeing this, I offered, how about you join my tribe? I asked if they had food for the winter. Hearing this, David's eyes lit up. He believed in my words, and the herd would be enough. For the winter, the others wanted to join too. They saw the power of my bow. With a weapon like that, they wouldn't lack prey or be attacked. They looked at David, waiting for him to accept. David was already moved, but as a leader, he still needed to think. After hesitating, he asked, if you invite us, will your leader agree? Hearing him, I told him not to worry. I smiled and said, don't worry about that, because I am the leader. David couldn't believe it. A young man like me was the leader, but then he understood as he saw my skills. Skills that neither he nor any adult could achieve. Thinking of this, he didn't hesitate and accepted. To ease their fears, I gave him my spear. I gave the spear to David, the axe to Mark, and the shield to Sarah. I knew that if I wanted to give them confidence, I had to give them weapons, and so it was. Receiving them, they rejoiced. David brought out the horn and the rabbits I asked him to catch alive. There were more than 30. Seeing them, I got excited, thinking that since they breed every 2 months, the tribe wouldn't worry about furs. After breakfast, David thought we would leave, but he saw me digging up stones and asked what I needed them for. With these, I'll make better weapons, and we'll hunt so much food we'll have leftovers. David was stunned. It was a life they never imagined. They started to help. With dozens of people, the speed increased. By noon, the large baskets were filled to the brim. We collected copper and tin ore, along with red clay, white clay, and kaolin for pots and molds. We finished and got ready. I set out with a team of dozens. Each donkey carried 2 sacks of ore, hay, rabbits, and seeds along the way. Our pace wasn't fast. I was teaching David and the others how to use the weapons. We walked until dusk and set up camp. The first half of the night was quiet, but in the early morning, I felt it. The ground was trembling. Immediately, I sat up, alert. Suddenly, I remembered David's long-nosed monster. In an instant, I knew what was coming. I woke everyone up and put out all the fires. With 2 sharp but youthful roars, 2 enormous silhouettes suddenly appeared in the distance. In the firelight, they saw dozens of men with torches, weapons, and bone ornaments. The man on the elephant signaled. They all charged toward us. My combat experience kept me calm as I gave orders to a member named Matthew. I told him to flank them and run north, while David, Mark, and Sam would follow me to cover the rear. I analyzed the situation. I designed a tactic. The enemy had 2 men on the beast. They weren't fast, and their weapons were axes and spears. With their throwing weapons, a person could barely reach a few meters, but my bow reached 100. Therefore, at a distance, I could drive them away. At that moment, David grew tense seeing the enemy charge, his hand on his spear. He hesitated, but seeing me so serene, he forced himself to calm down and find his strength. Looking at David, I mentally calculated the distance. 200 meters, 150, 100. Suddenly, I drew my bow and fired. A whistle sounded, and an enemy fell, the arrow piercing his chest. They saw a sharpened stick in his back and stood stunned. In that instant, 2 more arrows sliced through the air. 2 more men fell. The leader on the elephant spotted me, roared, and ordered a charge with stone axes. I pulled David behind a tree for cover. Mark did the same. Sam stepped forward and used the shield. A series of thuds rang out. Several axes and a spear hit the shield. Luckily, it was thick and Sam wasn't hurt, but if they continued, he wouldn't last long. Mark, behind the tree, saw the axes on the ground, picked up 2, and hurled them back. 2 men were wounded. David didn't stay behind. He picked up a spear and threw it back with force. An enemy was pinned to the ground. I shouted for them to run, keep their distance, and fight. They repeated the tactic over and over. Of the 40-man army, only 7 remained. The rest were dead or wounded. Suddenly, I yelled for them to stop. At 80 meters, I watched them. The leader, seeing that we weren't running, was confused. Only a few exhausted men remained by his side. Enraged, he charged again. I stabilized my breathing, drew my bow, and prepared. When he was 70 meters away, I fired. The arrow hit his right eye. The leader screamed and fell from the elephant, only to be crushed by the beast. He died instantly. The elephant felt it had stepped on something soft. It turned sharply to look and froze, stopping dead in its tracks, motionless. The subordinates were stunned. How did their boss die so suddenly? But they didn't stop in order to counterattack. 3 spears and an arrow flew. 3 enemies fell. Only 3 remained. Terrified, they fled, including the other man on the elephant who turned his beast. But it was too slow, so he jumped. I fired another arrow, and before he touched the ground, one pierced his chest. He fell. Now the 3 of them, with David, charged behind me. 3 stone axes finished off the last 2. Just like that, the battle ended. David and the others couldn't believe that. With only 4 men, we defeated 40. The 2 elephants, riderless, stood there confused. I immediately gave new orders. Sam would stay and wait, and Matthew would go find the rest of the tribe. David would go with me to finish off those who hadn't died yet. We split up to act. I searched for my arrows while they gathered intact spears and axes. The 2 ownerless elephants followed me, giving me soft nudges with their trunks as if they wanted to stay. I pushed a trunk away. Don't follow me. I can't keep you. They were monsters that could weigh 15 tons. How much would a creature like that eat? David said there were only 36 bodies, 4 were missing. I had a bad feeling. In the dark forest, it was impossible to find them, so I let it go. At dawn, Sam and Matthew returned. I waited for them to sit and eat. I asked David to distribute the recovered weapons. Now everyone had one. The animals ate hay, but 2 strangers were mooching food. The hay for 2 meals vanished instantly. My head throbbed, and I raised my fist to drive them away. As I raised my fist, one elephant looked at me pitifully, almost crying. The other curled hay with its trunk and offered it to me, as if saying, "It's delicious. Take it, don't kick us out." I smiled sadly. Reluctantly, I took the hay and stuffed it back into its mouth. I gave them hay to eat, then called everyone to leave. After moving on, I saw they were still eating and sighed with relief. I thought I'd lost them. The Shubuluo tribe from the dark forest didn't know the sunlit landscape and were very excited. On the way, they flushed out pheasants. I fired an arrow, and by afternoon, the harvest was good. Toby was at the river with his mother, looking north. His mother said I had gone that way, and since then, they went every day. They went to the river to fish, waiting for my return. Suddenly, Toby saw figures in the forest. With his sharp eyesight, he recognized me. The leader. Mom, the leader is back. He jumped with joy. I heard the noise and waved happily. At that moment, 2 sounds erupted. Elephant trumpets rang out. Everyone looked over. Hearing it, my stomach tied in knots. I couldn't believe that after going so far, I still hadn't lost them. Those 2 elephants. I thought to myself, don't come over here. But my fear came true. The 2 elephants crossed the river and stood right in front of me. These 2 had no manners. Upon arriving, they sprayed me with water, leaving me soaked. The message was, "Why did you abandon us?" I wiped my face in resignation. "If you want to eat, you'll have to work. I won't keep you for free." Hearing this, the elephants gave me little pats. I didn't know what it meant. The women of the fishing team were scared seeing the monsters, but seeing their closeness to me, they showed admiration. "The leader is incredible. He tames monsters," they whispered. Toby ran over. He ran up and hugged my leg, showing no fear of the creatures. I told them the news. I told them they were new members and guided them to the cave. They put Toby on an elephant. On the way, the people of the Yuan Shu tribe and the fishers observed each other. The fishers looked at the 18 blue donkeys. David and the others watched the women, their hairstyles, leather shoes, and the fish each one had. Each woman had a white-shafted spear, David's favorite. Seeing that everyone had one made him envious, but now he belonged to the same tribe. He got excited. I guided the Shu tribe back to the Yin tribe. Upon seeing me, the Yin people shouted, "Leader!" The people of the Shu tribe were drawn by the sound. Seeing the scene, they were stunned. They saw beautiful pots, countless fish at the entrance, and also a wounded boar. It weighed over 1,000 kilos, and I was pleased. The hunting team had mastered the spears. David finally understood the strength of the Yin tribe. Finally, he trusted that they wouldn't go hungry here. The children in the village and on a hill were facing 4 new beasts. They were the things they feared most. That grass would be enough to feed the animals all winter. I told them I had tamed the 4 beasts and they could help us work. Nearby, there were many red bricks. Silas said he was firing 4 kills a day and had even made a new tool for the children. He showed it to me proudly. Seeing the lame man's invention, I was speechless. It was a wooden rake. I praised his potential as an inventor. I asked him to make pottery for the newcomers tomorrow. Speaking of pottery, the elder said the Scorpion tribe had come to trade a few days ago. They paid with a lot of food, enough to last a long time. After inspecting the work, I began organizing the animals. I put the rabbits in a corner of the cave and built a stone and mud enclosure for the winter. 3 of the rabbits were pregnant and pulling out their fur for nests. The others, only a month or 2 old, stayed in the pen. The animals were large. By springtime, they would become breeding machines. The baby rhino didn't need watching. He stayed by the grass. I tied the blue donkeys to a tree so someone could look after them. With the chores done, dinner was ready. First, I held a ceremony for the new members. No one minded their hairstyles. In fact, they liked them. It made them look more energetic. Since they caught a boar today, we had pig's blood soup for dinner. They added vegetables and made several pots, along with the pheasant I had hunted. We had chestnut stew and 10 roasted fish. Everyone also received a serving of fruit. The sweet and sour meal united the old and new members as they ate and laughed. Later, I asked the elders to teach the newcomers leatherworking. While they learned together, I took a charred branch and drew a map of the outside terrain on the wall. It was a rough sketch of the cave, the stream, and the forest. I wondered how to plan the 3,000 acres in front of the cave. If it were all rice, we could never finish it. Besides, planting only rice was impossible since this was dry land. Rice grows in paddies, and converting dry land into paddies was a monumental task. Then there was the housing for the newcomers and newborns. The tribe now had 97 people. The cave was no longer enough. In the future, we would have to build houses on this land. Housing, rice paddies, orchards, a farm, warehouses, pastures, a foundry, and a carpentry shop. It all required careful planning. To achieve this, the first problem was the rice paddies. I planned to build a square city in the center with residential areas, a farm, and warehouses. With the foundry and carpentry shop inside, the city would house 5,000 people. It would take several years to complete in phases. Next, I'd dig a moat around it. Using the excavated earth and bricks, I'd build a wall to protect us from beasts and outsiders. With the moat as the center, an artificial river would be dug, and then the earth would be moved. By diverting the eastern stream with bypasses, the water would return to the creek, forming a system. In this river network, small irrigation canals would be dug. The moat and artificial river would be 4 meters wide, while the stream was 8 to 9 meters. By narrowing the channel, the flow wouldn't change, but the river's speed would double, making hydraulic works like water wheels easier. The plan was to use the cave as the center and measure 200 meters on each side for the city, so as not to delay construction. The first phase of planting, phase 1, would be digging the canal. The calculated canal would be 700 meters long. The excavated earth would become bricks. The second phase was digging the moat. There was no rush since the cave was habitable. The third phase was the wall, planned with a 4-meter base, 2-meter top, and 5 meters high. Trapezoidal with 4 gates, 1 per side, and a 4-meter moat. No one could cross it. The fourth phase was the 700-meter return river. The excavated earth would become bricks. The excavated earth would become bricks for houses and buildings. The project would finish in 3 to 5 years. Otherwise, I feared that the cave would no longer be enough. The next morning, I organized the tasks. There was much to do, so gathering stopped. The newcomers hadn't escaped yet. I assigned Silas to make pottery and the children to cut grass, tying it into bundles for storage. David, Hunter, Big Max, and Ben. Max went to the mountain to bring trees for spears. The women split up. One team went to the valley I visited to gather plants. Molly saw 6 pack animals with baskets for transport. Another team went to the forest to scrape bark from white wax trees. It's good material for wax, and I plan to use it for bronze molds. I assigned the remaining men to felling trees with thick trunks. The trunks would be for shelters and the branches for firewood. I planned to make charcoal to smelt copper. The more, the better. The pack animals transported it. If they couldn't, they'd ask the baby rhino for help. The people didn't understand. They thought we should store food, but I told them the reserves were enough. We had enough to last until spring. If we kept fishing, the population would suffer. So I let the fish spawn and sent the teams out. I got to work. First, I used firewood to make charcoal. Then, I used kaolin and clay to make crucibles and ladles for refining and alloying. Next, I used fire clay to make square casting molds. I would cast copper and tin plates, then adjust the proportions for different tools. Once everything was ready, I built the furnace. I mixed clay, broken pottery, and straw to make a mud paste. With it, I built 4 cylindrical furnaces, each 40 centimeters wide. This way, I could fire them all at once to save time. I used python skin to make bellows. Silas didn't understand, but in his heart, he felt great anticipation. When I finished the preparations, the most primitive smelting team was complete, just waiting for the charcoal to burn and the furnaces to dry. Big Max and Hunter worked all day bringing spear shafts, but the woodcutters struggled. They broke 3 stone axes. I told them to continue tomorrow. Whoever did well would receive new equipment. They were confused. The stone axe was the best they'd seen. Could there be something better? Their anticipation grew. After dinner, everyone relaxed. During my downtime, I melted wax. Once it solidified, I carved tool shapes with a bone knife and covered the models with clay. I left a small hole, waited for the clay to dry, then heated it to pour the melted wax out from the inside. This gave me a hollow mold. The remaining wax made demolding easier. Though it was tedious, it was quite precise and avoided waste since the wax could be reused. The next morning, the people took the pack animals out. Under my instructions, they understood that beasts could help with the labor. Big Max and 3 others stayed behind to help me with the bellows. Silas's pottery was ready, so he assisted me today. He was smart, so I decided to teach him smelting. I wouldn't do this work alone. It was better to find an apprentice. I lit 2 of the 4 furnaces. David and Ben worked the bellows while Big Max and Hunter added charcoal and ore. With the bellows, the flames roared. Soon, the ore melted, and liquid copper flowed through a slit, accumulating into a piece of copper mixed with slag. I processed the tin ore the same way. It melted in minutes. I used a branch to pull it out. From the ashes came 2 pieces of impure metal. I repeated the process, and after a few hours, I had a pile of it. I lit the furnaces. I waited for the temperature to rise and put copper and tin in crucibles. Once liquefied, I skimmed off the impurities with a spoon. Using a ceramic rod, I poured the liquid copper into molds to cool, then did the same with the tin. Silas and the young men watched. They stared as the liquid metal solidified before their eyes. They didn't understand and were completely amazed. When the metal plates cooled, I hurried. All the plates were ready. It was noon. Under the sun, the plates reflected a dazzling light. Everyone stared open-mouthed, having never seen anything so beautiful and shiny. Kevin approached, touching everything. "Leader, what is this?" I patted his head. "This is called tin. Stay here, I'm going to get a few things." Kevin nodded and whispered copper and tin while I brought tools and molds immediately. I began smelting bronze. I put the plates in a crucible, waited for them to melt, mixed them, and poured. The first batch was axes and hammers. I poured the hot alloy into the mold, and white smoke rose. I waited for the temperature to drop. I broke the mold with a stone. Among the fragments lay a large axe with a golden glow, bigger than a firefighter's axe. I tasked Silas with sharpening the axe while I prepared to cast other tools, sharpeners, and plates. I also assembled saws, knives, and chisels. I also made spearheads. At dusk, the work stopped. The large golden axe blade was sharpened and fitted with a handle. The first bronze axe. There were also 2 saws with handles. David and the others saw the golden axe and crowded around, their eyes practically glued to it. I smiled and pulled out a spear with a golden tip. People were stunned. It was a spear, too beautiful, especially Ryan and Duke. They were practically drooling. "Leader, is there any for us?" they asked. I smiled, took out some ore, and gave it to David. "It's made from this stone, but there's none left." The tribe was amazed. They had dug for this stone without expecting it to become a weapon. It was so beautiful. Marcus was the most direct. "If there's no more, we can dig. We know where." I nodded, said it was inefficient to wait, and that soon we could bring back plenty. I promised them that soon, everyone would have a spear just like that one. Then I taught them how to use the saws. The 2-man saw sliced through a trunk in no time. They used the hand saw to clear branches from a log in a minute. The 3-foot axe was also impressive. It was easy to handle. If Delilah used it, a thin tree would fall in a few swings. Once they learned, I let them eat. After the meal, the people listened to Todd tell stories while I established measurement systems for using the axes. The hemp was already harvested. The women braided ropes while the children watched the rabbits give birth outside the hutch. The 3 female rabbits gave birth to 6 or 7 kits each. The rabbit population nearly doubled. Todd had pottery experience and helped with wax molds while I made bronze shovels for the river. Todd could imitate the design for agriculture using my model, allowing me to finish my own tasks. I researched the most important tool, the plow. I planned 2 sizes, one for the cart and another for heavy work. The other was for the cart, specifically designed for plowing and digging out riverbeds. The next day, some women braided reins while others cleared space for a stable. Todd and 4 friends handled the foundry. They smelted copper and tin plates, asking me questions while I guided the women in construction and tree cutting. We set the posts, driving one into the ground every 2 meters to form a sturdy enclosure. They tied crossbeams to secure them, wove branches into the fence, applied mud, and built a shed inside. The 4-meter shed became the home for the baby mammoths. We finished by lining the inside with bundled grass. The tribe was busy, unaware that the Scorpion tribe had already set their sights on us. Their leader had a major concern. As the weather cooled, their stream was drying up. They had to travel 3 kilometers for water and needed storage containers, so he went to trade with the tribe for pottery. He failed to get the ceramics, and the idea of a raid began to form. In his mind, the men were weak. They had fewer than 10 men, while we had 15. Plus, last time he made long stone spears, he thought defeating and robbing us would be easy. Taking our pottery and food wouldn't be a problem. That morning, Silas led his men out. Armed with several spears, they marched toward the tribe, ready to defeat our hunting party and then loot the settlement. In the forest, Arthur and Joe were already busy felling trees. Today they worked fast. With 3 axes and 2 saws, in just half an hour, they could obtain a clean trunk. That was the speed of just one group. The team had 10 men in 3 groups, dropping 3 trees every 30 minutes. The last man was Mason, in charge of transport. He guided a grazing mammoth nearby when suddenly, a group rushed down from the opposite mountain. Each one carried a spear. Mason screamed toward the slope and pulled the mammoth to flee. Hearing him, everyone stopped working. They grabbed their weapons to fight. Silas and his men chased them to the slope until, with several whistling sounds, 2 mammoths were hit. They trumpeted and fell. The other 4 ran frantically toward the tribe, dragging the fallen bodies behind them. As they reached the hill, the tribe pulled out stone axes and hurled them. With a whistle, 3 enemies hit the ground. 2 more were wounded, leaving 10. Silas, furious, ordered them to throw spears, but Arthur and the others had already taken cover. The spears thudded into the dirt. Derek and the others, hidden behind trees, launched 9 white-shafted spears at Silas's tribe. For more fell. The survivors hid behind trees in terror. Derek and his men also stayed low, waiting, but heard nothing. They didn't know Silas was scared to death. The enemy was terrifying, and the tribe was much larger than expected. Much larger. He only had 8 men left, 2 of them wounded. Fighting was impossible, so he acted immediately. He led them toward the dragon's cave. At the same time, back at the village, things were moving. Sarah brought the baby mammoths to me, so I could name them. I called the big one Titan and the small one Bond. I was about to speak. Titan looked west and trumpeted. Sarah startled. I looked west and saw 4 mammoths dragging something. They were dragging the bodies of 2 of their own. Spears were stuck in the mammoths, and no one from the logging team was behind them. I grew alarmed and ordered the tribe to hide in the cave until my return. Then, I grabbed my weapons and set out. I took my bow, my arrows, and my gold-tipped spear. I mounted Titan and rode west with Bun following. Following the blood trail, Titan carried me fast into the forest. Suddenly, people appeared carrying golden axes. It was Arthur and the others. I was puzzled. Why were they here? No one seemed hurt. Joe brought the team to me and explained everything. Hearing it, I wondered why Silas and his people had attacked us. They attacked us, but it didn't matter why. If they harmed my people, they would pay. Not even death would be enough for those bastards. I wouldn't let my soul rest until they paid. I brandished my spear and led the loggers toward Silas's tribe. We reached Silas's tribe after 2 o'clock. The clearing was empty, and the entrance was blocked by a massive rock. There was a crack where they were spying. Silas was terrified the enemy would come for revenge, and his fear came true. The enemy had arrived. The leader had a gold-tipped spear and rode a giant beast. In that moment, Silas regretted everything. If only he had known the enemy was this strong, he never would have attacked. I noticed the spying eyes, grabbed my bow, drew back, and notched an arrow. A sound rang out. A cry of pain. The arrow pierced Silas's eye. Go move that rock, I ordered. I pointed to the entrance stone. They stepped forward and began to push, but even with the strength of all 3, they couldn't move it. The rock pushed back against them. Did they really think blocking the door would solve this? I stepped closer and readied another arrow. Behind the rock, several men were bracing themselves. I fired another arrow, and the enemy scattered. This time the shaft pierced through 2 men. The others, seeing this, panicked. They fled in terror, refusing to stay close. Thus, Derek and the other 2 moved the rock, and the 3 bodies behind it were crushed. Everything went silent as the entrance opened, revealing a fire. Women and children trembled in the grass near the 5 remaining men. 3 held spears to protect them, while 2 wounded men lay in the grass. I entered with my spear, and Arthur and the others followed behind me. The 2 wounded men on the ground trembled, begging for mercy. Who asked for forgiveness while holding a weapon? I brandished my spear and knocked down the 3 remaining spears. 1 wounded man grabbed a hidden stone to resist. I aimed my spear forward and, with a dry thud, struck him directly. I pierced his left chest. Everyone on your knees. Whoever resists, dies. I shouted with fury. Fear weakened their legs, and they collapsed to the ground. Derek, find their food and take it. Then I turned to them. Your leader attacked us first. You can't blame me. I did this because of him. I wanted to absorb them. To avoid grudges, I blamed their leader, but I overestimated their loyalty to their own tribe. They didn't care about their leader, only their food. The women saw Derek taking their meat, and, distressed and nearly crying, they went to beg me. I looked at them calmly. If you join my tribe, you will have food. No one will freeze. Whoever wants to join, come with me now. As soon as I spoke, several of them stood up. They followed behind me, then more, until in a short time only 1 seriously wounded man remained on the ground. By his appearance, he wouldn't survive. I didn't worry about him and guided the new members out of the cave. I ordered the cave to be burned. Silas's tribe vanished. Upon returning, the new members integrated. Well, they had traded with Silas before, so they fit in quickly. I hadn't lied. The Han tribe's food was abundant. With the loot, there was enough food for 200 people all winter. The cave was at its limit. With winter approaching, the warm cave made the people feel secure. They saw we raised wild beasts, especially Titan and the others, true monsters. This gave them a new idea of the Han tribe's power. Now they were proud to be members. Everyone has been weaving ropes nonstop, accumulating piles. The men continue logging, storing trunks for building, and branches for the kills. Charlie, you weren't idle either. You created woodworking tools and smelted 50 bronze shovels, with everything ready to finish the first phase. Diverting the water. I had to start, so I took a long hemp rope to measure and mark the location of the north wall. There, at every corner, I placed a post. With that guide, I looked for the best spot for the river. Then I would build the kiln. The excavation would provide plenty of soil, so I would make the adobe bricks at the same time. I decided to bake blue bricks, a process that requires a lot of water. To make access easier, the kiln would be located on the bank of the stream. They had already baked red bricks, perfect for the new kiln. The cylindrical kiln required the whole tribe and took 5 days to build. Making the brick molds took more time, and with that, they finished. The plow I made appeared under a 2-meter wide frame. I installed 4 bronze plowshares. We just had to pull it. One passed to plow a strip 2 meters wide and 40 centimeters deep. To pull it, I had Titan and the other beast, with the 2 of them plowing in parallel. They moved forward, opening a riverbed 4 meters wide. In less than an hour, they dug a stretch 700 meters long and 40 centimeters deep. Seeing this, I was happy. At this rate, the wall wouldn't take 3 years. I planned to bake bricks in winter. By then, everyone would be free and the heat from the kiln would be welcome, a happy job. But there was a problem, how these adobes would cover the earthen wall. Each brick was huge. Transporting dirt and adobes would take a long time, so I decided to make a wheelbarrow. For this project, I first had to find helpers. They would be the tribe's carpenters. The most talented was Mason, who in his old tribe was able to devise a way to use red-hot coal to hollow out a log. The other was Miller. He didn't talk much, but his work was impeccable, based on my designs. Recalling my past life, it took the 3 of us one day to create the first wheelbarrow. For the construction, the people were fascinated with the new tool. It was less exhausting than carrying by hand, but I wasn't optimistic. When turning, the wheelbarrow wobbled from side to side. Like that, it wouldn't last. I saw the problem and improved it by lengthening the wheel axle. After giving instructions to my assistants, they got to work. The improvement was quick. 2 hours later, the new wheelbarrow was ready. This time, the wheelbarrow didn't wobble, and efficiency increased. I decided to mass-produce the second model. The first batch would be 30 units. Between men and women, there were dozens of adults. The wheelbarrow, for hauling dirt, would be useful. Then, the team of 3 carpenters, at a rate of 2 days. For every 3 wheelbarrows, equipped the crew. The water diversion moved fast. The adobe work, once slow, now progressed faster with the wheelbarrows. On the 18th day, a trench 698 meters long and 4 meters deep stretched out before me. I stopped the excavation. The remaining 2 meters would be dug when diverting the water. The tribe returned to their routine. The men cut wood for building, and the women returned to gathering. It was never enough. The 30 wheelbarrows were ready for future copper mining. Arthur and David, the men under my direction, tried to make a larger cart. Both had experience. I gave them the design for a wagon and left them alone to experiment. I dedicated myself to making agricultural tools. Everyone was busy. That morning, leaving the cave, I saw, what was it? A white blanket. Winter had arrived. It snowed incessantly. The woodcutting stopped. Everyone took shelter. The women no longer went out to gather. Bricks couldn't be fired. We had to wait, so I began. My plan was to teach language and writing. The people already knew some words, especially Kevin, the boy who could already form sentences. That made it easy. I just had to teach them more vocabulary. Regarding the Chinese characters, teaching simplified characters wasn't practical. Clerical script would be easier to accept. The main goal was recognition to increase literacy. 2. Motivate them. I set a rule, a daily test. Whoever didn't read received a half portion. Whoever learned well got a prize. It worked. The tribe got excited, especially the children, who practiced. After class, days later, the snow stopped. The brick firing plan began. I did a demonstration with 2 batches and let the tribe take over. They only worked to load and unload the kiln. The rest was firing and cooling. Days passed studying and moving bricks. A simple life. When they weren't busy, they made ornaments. Most were men doing great work. I didn't understand why until the elder explained it was to avoid inbreeding. Many tribes met in spring for a mating festival. If a woman was attracted to a man, she joined his tribe. That attraction in the tribe was based on the man's strength, his tribe's power, and their food. This was judged by their ornaments. Carrying a long femur as a weapon meant your tribe hunted great beasts and had food. These words gave me some ideas. I felt I was missing something, but I lacked nothing. Ancient necklaces didn't interest me. I thought about it and decided to create a headband. Headbands were made of gold, silver, jade, or leather. Each could use a different material. Gold is a symbol of nobility, but the Wan tribe had no gold, so my headband was made of bronze. Since I had one, I couldn't leave the others with nothing. I made a tin one for David, and he loved it. The other men, with my help, also created hairstyles with other materials, fur, wood, bone, and hairpins. From then on, the Wan tribe had a new rule. Children could only wear buns or headbands, no hairpins. Adults could use headbands and hairpins to distinguish themselves from minors. The women no longer just wore ponytails. Adult women wore buns with combs or hairpins, while young women could wear ponytails, loose hair, or braids. They used hairpins as ornaments. Metal was strategic. Not everyone could use it. I used it as a reward. You could earn it. Now, in the Wan tribe, one look at someone's head revealed their status, age, class, or contributions. I made a headband for Kevin. It had a bronze cloud brooch, a prize for learning to read. He was the first child to have one. Metal. He was happy. In reality, my enthusiasm wasn't just about differentiating classes, but for the mating festival. It wasn't just to find a partner, but to meet others and see if we could trade. Before, salt came from trading with the Sieting tribe, but now that they no longer existed, and before I could find a salt mine, I wanted a new supplier. Han pottery was valuable. I wanted to trade it for salt and buy people. 200 people wouldn't fill my city. However, not all tribes were like the Han, carefree about food and able to think about the future of their development. For example, the Heishu tribe, east of the Han, was mid-sized with over 150 people. They had a major difference from the Han. The Heishu tribe had their own beliefs. They worshipped the black rat and had a shaman. This winter, the shaman claimed to receive divine guidance that the winter would be longer. Worried about food, he asked the chief to lead a hunting party. So the chief of the Heishu tribe, Silas, took 19 men to hunt. Soon, they noticed something strange to the west of their forest. Every so often, a dense black smoke rose. It was intentional. There were people to the west, long ago. They reached the edge of the forest, but the river was impossible to cross, so they didn't venture further. Now, the smoke came from near the river. Silas informed the Heishu shaman, who didn't seem surprised. He was intrigued. To him, fire was for cooking, and frequent fire meant plenty of food. If it were for warmth, why didn't they keep it going? The shaman was suspicious and asked Silas to investigate and try to trade. Perhaps they could learn something. Silas set out with his team at that moment. On that mission, meanwhile, in the Wan tribe, Marcus and Leo watched the brick kiln. They stared at the kiln fire, tossing in wood occasionally. They had been feeding the fire since the night before, and by afternoon, the bricks were red hot. It was time for water and sealing the kiln. Marcus sent Leo to find the others. Leo nodded and went to the cave, but when Marcus was left alone, Meatball's roar echoed. Immediately after, the beast began to run, and screams were heard. Marcus climbed out of the kiln pit. He poked his head out and saw a dozen spears flying toward Meatball. Terrified, the beast ran toward the cave. I was about to lead the people to pour water when, as I stepped out, I saw Meatball being chased. Silas and his men were going to follow him, but then they saw that I was coming out with my people, and they froze. Damn it, who's killing my Meatball? To arms. The tribe, hearing their leader, came out shouting with weapons in hand. They surrounded Silas's group. Silas stood open-mouthed at the sight of the crowd. They all looked fierce. I wore a crown, a brooch, and a gold spear. My gaze was icy. The formation behind me was even more dazzling, blinding. Each one had a bronze shovel, not to mention their power. The formation alone was enough to paralyze Silas and his people with fear. Meatball, seeing that I had control, returned and stood behind me, roaring at Silas with newfound courage. I patted him to quiet him down and turned to Silas. He is our beast. Why were you attacking him? Silas was bewildered, but he saw how close I was to it. He didn't expect they could control a beast like that. But what surprised him more was Titan, even larger than Meatball, who at that moment heard the commotion. He ran up next to Meatball, staring at the surrounded group. Silas and his men nearly wet themselves with fear. There's another one. Seeing Silas's shock, I frowned and signaled the elder to ask who they were and what they were doing. The elder stepped forward and spoke to Silas with words and gestures, translating my words and introducing me. Silas apologized. He didn't know the beast had an owner. That's why they hunted it, to survive. Finally, with tears in his eyes, Silas revealed his purpose. I didn't expect them to want to trade food, but they actually had something that interested me. What do they have to trade? Silas hesitated, mentioning stone vessels. They are essential for any tribe. This time, the elder intervened. We have plenty of vessels. If you want, you can trade them for other goods. We accept salt or people. Now it was Silas's turn. He was stunned. Not only did we have vessels, but we were offering them to him. He couldn't believe it. The elder called some children to bring out the pottery. In 2 minutes, they brought a jar, a pot, and bowls. Some curious children held bowls of meat soup, slurping loudly. The scene left Silas dumbfounded. He had never smelled anything like it. I asked someone to bring a bowl of soup for him. Without tasting the soup, he wouldn't know the use of pottery. Silas took the bowl and sipped, feeling a warmth spread to his stomach. Then, his whole body warmed up. This soup was prepared for warmth. It didn't have much meat, but it had bones and chilies. Drinking it was a great comfort. Silas was conquered by the soup. He decided to trade people for ceramic pots. He didn't know what salt was, so the elder explained the prices. 1 pot for 2 teenagers or 1 adult woman. It was an acceptable price, but on this trip, he hadn't brought any people. However, he wanted the pot so badly that he shamelessly asked for a favor. He asked if he could take it now and bring the people later. Hearing this, I refused. Credit is impossible. If they didn't pay, I'd be a fool. Seeing that I wouldn't accept, Silas immediately took a leather bag and offered it to me. There is food inside, he said. It's not much, but we hope to take 1 dish. Next time we will bring people. Did he think I lacked food? Carelessly, I opened it. and looked inside without interest, but I was shocked. My eyes locked onto the contents. They were peanuts. In my mind, dozens of dishes appeared that I could make with them. Roasted, boiled, fried, or even peanut butter. This was a great find, beyond just its nutritional value. The most important thing was that I could extract oil from them. If we planted them in large quantities, we would have oil for cooking. That fat could be used for soap, candles, and explosives. They were a strategic resource. I suppressed my excitement. It took me a moment to regain my serious face. Where did you get this? Silas gestured frantically to explain. Until I finally understood. It came from the god his tribe worshipped. The rats would dig up the peanuts from their burrows. They knew where to find them, so they weren't rare to them. I nodded in silence and took a basket. A basket full of peanuts could also be traded for ceramics. With the shell still intact, Silas couldn't believe his luck. That I would give him such a deal. Excited, he agreed to bring more. Silas took the basket, a pot, and a ceramic bowl. I even gave him a spoon as a gift. As they walked away, I felt a chill. An unknown tribe had reached my cave. Luckily, there weren't many of them. If they had come to attack, even if the tribe resisted, there would have been casualties. I planned the defenses, but a massive wall wasn't something built overnight. I needed to create a provisional defense quickly during this period. I told David to take people to water and seal the kiln while I stayed at the entrance, thinking. The kiln had been running for 2 months, and I had accumulated many bricks. Construction would wait for spring, so I looked at those bricks. Thinking about this, a simple defense formed in my mind. The next morning, I gathered the adults and said I would use 3 walls to surround the cave, leaving a 2-meter entrance to the east. The gate would be a 3-meter high barricade with 4 rows of spears in front. The wall would be made of bricks. In the cold, poured water would freeze and bind them together. In the spring, when the ice melted, the bricks could still be used for the permanent wall. In the following days, all the adults worked together with wheelbarrows, and the wall's height grew rapidly before our eyes.